Drip, drip. The sound echoed down the metallic interior of the derelict, each time fading to a suffocating silence that only space could bring. The one thing deeper than the silence was the darkness that consumed the light from Logan's torch in a way that did not seem natural. Drip, drip. He moved along, torchlight shakily scanning the area ahead of him, desperately looking for signs of Quinn, who he had lost contact with over 12 hours ago. Suddenly he stopped. A dark red stain was smeared across the floor. Casting his light further down the corridor, he saw another patch, then another, and another. Drip, drip. He followed the trail deeper into the derelict to a large room lined with rows and rows of chrome drawers. He knew what he would find in those drawers and shuddered at the thought. Drip, drip. It was louder now, coming from somewhere in the room. Finding the trail again with his torch, Logan continued on. As he did, the trail got wider, slicker, fresher, until it stopped. Drip, drip. Now the sound was right in front of him, coming from a crimson pool at his feet. Drip, drip. He moved the torch slowly upwards. As he did, the light revealed a body hidden in the pipework above. Quinn's body, his face contorted in fear, blood dripping from the eyes. Logan stared in horror as Quinn's face began to squirm, writhing faster and faster until out erupted hundreds of eel-like creatures. He stood frozen as they fell on him and started burrowing their way under his skin. His screams filled the ship, reverberating around the metal walls before they immediately stopped, throwing the ship back into eerie silence. Silence except for one sound. Drip, drip. Hello, and welcome to the Bad Spot, an actual play podcast where I, Matt Risby, and I alone am playing through Ironsworn Starforged. This week's grisly tale from the Drift was from Chris Munford, who joins an elite club of people who have submitted 3 Tales from the Drift. There he joins, well, me, basically, because I wrote 12 of the first 24 that featured in the first season. So I guess, welcome to the Inner Sanctum, Chris. I am a huge fan of your work, and the 3 pieces you've submitted so far have been featured because they're really good, and I am thrilled that my community have enjoyed using these prompts to come up with these amazing little bits of flash fiction. When this season is done, I shall very much miss receiving them and reading them and recording them, but for now, I've got loads still to get through. As I mentioned last week, submissions are now closed for Tales from the Drift because I have more than enough material to see us to the end of the season, so please don't send any more because I am at capacity. But whilst I have your attention, why don't you leave a like, subscribe, and click the little bell icon so you can follow along with the campaign each and every week. These things are really important for supporting the channel and supporting what I do, and if you really want to support the channel, then why not check out the Bad Spot Patreon. There you'll get early access to all episodes, exclusive behind the scenes content, and your name on screen, like these lovely people. Last time out, we caught up with Archer and saw his view of events leading up to Luna's daring rescue attempt. He finds himself in an incongruously luxurious area of Lastport, completely hidden away from the rest of the complex. He is sat unrestrained opposite his apparent captor, the Anvil, the ruler of Lastport and engineer of Archer's kidnapping. The Anvil is the opposite of what anyone would expect of such a figure, a slight elderly eccentric who tells Archer he's the first person he has met face to face in decades. As the Anvil learns of the Pact's arrival, he tells Archer that he needs his help to defeat them. Tired of being forced to do the bidding of others, Archer demands more help in return. The Anvil agrees, but their strange meeting is interrupted by Luna, who is launched through the doors of the room by the Enforcer bot standing guard outside. The Anvil is stunned by her ability to find this place and very nearly reach them whilst evading capture. Archer, however, is more concerned about where the Eclipse has gone, and more importantly, where Griff is. So I think we're just going to cut and move forward in time a little bit here, because I was thinking about just coming in on this kind of quite funny image of Luna, untangled and now standing in front of Archer, having spent a good 10 to 15 minutes explaining everything that has happened. How she had the gunfight with the goons in the market, how she lost Griff, how she used the comms device to track him down, how she ran into Cole in the hangar, the shootout with the Pact and the mercenaries, Griff taking off in the Eclipse, the lockdown, their escape, navigating the elevator shaft and then nearly dying just getting to this floor, facing off against the Enforcer bots, destroying the pond outside, getting captured, and Archer is just kind of stood listening to all this, and he's massaging the bridge of his nose as if he's about to have an aneurysm processing it all. And I mean, this has all happened in like a handful of hours, right? And he knows that's like a lot to have gone down in such a short space of time, but that is just totally Luna, isn't it? And I think, and this little scene, this little kind of freeze frame that we've come in on is, I think, a perfect encapsulation of their relationship. And I just kind of thought it would be a cool, funny visual moment to begin on. So I think what Archer will want to know mainly after he's kind of recovered from the shock of both Luna arriving here, but also of the news that Griff and the Eclipse are gone, what he'll want to know more than anything is where Griff has gone or where he's trying to go. And Luna won't know where that is in terms of like knowing the forge where it is, but she might have some kind of clue. And when I say that, I mean, at the end of season 2, Griff did actually tell her where he wanted to go. We just didn't catch it because it was all beeps and we don't understand that. So where was it? So we need a name. And we'll take the book and we will look up a planet name. It's not an oracle, they're just kind of lists of names for each type of planet. Now, from the place in Archer's visions, which is where we're going, it's a rocky or desert planet. So looking in the book to try and pick a name, there's nothing immediate that's jumping out of either list. But maybe we could combine two together, maybe. I kind of like Cobalt from the Rocky World list, and from the Desert Planet list there is Nux, N-U-X, which I think is like a little suffix to kind of slap on the end there. So the mysterious location Griff said he was heading to is called Cobalt Nux. That is where we're going. And I think Luna isn't kind of sure she heard it right and works through a few variations of like Nobolt, Cux and, you know, things that sound similar before she settles on something that she's 90% sure is correct. And she says, "Does that name mean anything to you?" Archer shakes his head. He's racking his brain, but it's not ringing any bells. He thinks, maybe if I ran it through the archive, there's a chance there's mention of it somewhere. And Luna says, "And the archive," and Archer says, "is on the Eclipse." Luna says, "Well, that's no good." And Archer turns to the Anvil, who's been watching this with great interest. This guy has been up here isolated for more than a decade, right? He's finally met one other human face to face, and then moments later, another is thrown through the door, wrapped in a net. And he's just kind of baffled by their dynamic. And Archer says to him, "I take it you installed tracking tracers on my ship?" And the Anvil says, "Naturally." And Archer says, "Can we get a whereabouts on the ship, please?" And the Anvil says, "Of course." And he goes to his desk and once again presses on a smooth part of the desktop, and a small dial appears, which he carefully twists and turns, and clicking some strange communique to somewhere else in this station. Luna kind of pulls Archer to one side and says, "You trust him?" And Archer says, "Of course not. But he needs us, and we need Griff and the Eclipse." Luna says he can't have gone far. Not without an E-drive. Archer nods in agreement as the Anvil joins them, holding a length of grey ticker tape, looking bemused, and says, "I have some distressing news. It seems your plucky mechanical companion has drifted rather too close to danger. The last signal we received came from the demi-sector where our old friends, the Pact, call home. Narthex Prime." And he lets the name hang in the air, and Archer, who remembers what this place is from when Dr. Freeman told him, just sort of nods as he tries to kind of process what that means, process that Griff is probably on or near this vast, impenetrable fortress that's been described to him. And Luna says, well, let's go. Let's go get Griff. What are we waiting for? And the Anvil returns to his desk and slumps back down in his chair and says, I love this one's spirit. It is quite extraordinary. But I fear what sliver of hope there was is now lost. Narthex Prime is a literal fortress. There is no conceivable chance of getting through their defences, let alone getting out again. And Archer says, he's right. I mean, we don't even have a ship. And Luna says, that's not strictly true. And they both turn and look at her. She says, in fact, we have the perfect ship for the job. And we leave the Anvil's quarters and cut back to the hangar bay where Luna started the shootout with the mercenaries. And remember, this whole thing was why the Anvil enacted the lockdown, and the chaos that ensued following Luna's escape was really bad. The Pact came under fire, and this whole area, this whole hangar bay, joined in. They turned on the emissary. But the lockdown was enacted, and the enforcer bots were dispatched, and that is what we see as we move through the hangar. Now, there were 3, I think, enforcer bots outside the Anvil's office. Well, here there are at least 10 times that. And they have been ruthless in neutralizing the threats. We see the Pact ship, which is pretty big. It's much bigger than the Eclipse, maybe like 3 or 4 times the size. And as you would expect, it's very unusual in appearance. It's sort of triangular, but it's wider at the front than it is at the back, where it kind of tapers. And it's completely flat-nosed and boxy. The material that it's made of appears to be kind of bronze and chrome. And whilst it is kind of like cubed and boxy, it has no points or hard edges. They're all kind of slightly curved. It's quite a weird thing to look at. And it is currently surrounded by a ring of enforcer bots who have snared in their nets or otherwise incapacitated various members of the Pact. They are encircling the ship. It was clearly their target to protect. And I think that the denizens of Lastport, who were the antagonists in all this, well, Luna started it, but they joined in. Those that are still standing at the end of this fight, they are well backed away. They are giving the ship and the bots a wide berth. The situation is under control, the control of the bots, who have quashed this little flashpoint, and the Pact ship and at least some of its crew have been captured. So we are going to need to ask the Oracle a few questions about things, because this all went down off camera. And I want to know that there is anything here that's helpful to us. Like, we're going to have to take the ship and try to use it to infiltrate Narthex Prime, right? That has to be the play. That's the only way we're going to get aboard and get the Eclipse back. We are going to have to sneak on board what is essentially a city-state space fortress in this Pact spaceship, pretending to be the emissary returning. And the only way we can make that work narratively is if we say right now that in the chaos, the emissary and his crew did not manage to communicate what was going on at Lastport. They didn't get to tell the Pact that there was a shootout, that they'd come under fire or anything. So Narthex Prime and the Pact will be expecting these guys back unharmed. And I'm going to say that because if we don't, then we've got no chance. Like, we have to give ourselves a break for the good of the story. So what else do we need to know? Well, I think firstly, I'd like to know if the ship is damaged, and if it's damaged to the point that it will need to be repaired, because it was pretty chaotic, but the enforcer bots did get there quite quickly. So I'm going to say the odds of this are 50-50. Is the Pact ship damaged? 61 is yes. Okay, so I mean, at least that's bad, right? But at least that tells us what we need to do first. Okay, next question. Are any of the Pact left alive? Because we could do with some information. How we get that out of them, I don't know, but it would be very useful. So are any of the Pact left alive? And I think it's the same odds, 50-50. 12 is no. Okay, so the ship's damaged and we don't have any members of the crew left alive to get information. Well, I never said it would be easy. Well, we know what we have to do, I guess, and I think that Archer has kind of broken this down to the Anvil, who's just so bemused that this is the plan. And I think that the Anvil knows this is actually the best shot at this. Like, the Pact have never been to last port like this, never set foot in the place in any kind of official capacity or meaningful way, and now they have. And it has gone south real quick. But even so, he senses that they have an opportunity. They have a Pact ship, which is an emissary ship, no less, and it can get someone aboard Narthex Prime, and that is significant. The people who live here, the people who are trapped here in the Delphian Flux, this whole sector, have not had anything resembling this good an opportunity to expose a vulnerability in the Pact's defences, maybe ever. And I think that whilst Archer and Luna have been talking about what to do, the Anvil would have been thinking about how he can use them, what he can use them for. Like, getting aboard Narthex Prime is quite something, and it has crossed his mind that he could just smuggle some kind of device aboard, but ultimately there is no explosive device that could make a dent in something that size. It's not he could pack the emissary ship full of TNT and set it off when it docks, but Narthex Prime is the size of a city. It would cause some damage, but nowhere enough to bring it down or even significantly weaken it. It's basically a splinter in the thumb of a giant. It is so insignificant, it's basically nothing. And this is why he'd been trying to acquire the bioweapon, right? That parasitic moss that probably could have been more effective only because there is no known way to fight that. So it could have caused all sorts of problems, but we all know what happened to that. So that is off the table. So he has to really concede that just getting people aboard, these two people in particular, who have proved themselves different to others who are in this sector, just by virtue of the fact that they got here, they navigated the spine of Kronos, which has never been done to his knowledge, and he just kind of sort of trusts them to do something. At the very least, he trusts them to do something chaotic or disruptive that might give everyone else a chance or an opportunity to either strike out or make some sort of escape from the sector. I don't know, and he doesn't either. This is not a good plan, but this is all that he and anyone has got. Either way, right? If Archer and Luna succeed, the Pact are weakened or destroyed. That's what happens. Or they fail, and the Pact know what happens to the emissary on last port, and they come and wipe it off the map along with everyone else on it. So those are the stakes. They are incredibly high. The fate of the sector is in the hands of these two idiots stood before the Anvil right now. Two strangers he knows next to nothing about. But what he does know, and this is very important, is that this is probably about as good as it's ever going to get. So he lets Archer finish running down the plan. It doesn't take long, let's be honest. And he says, I am many things to many people, but one thing I am not is devoid of sentiment. And he reaches under his desk and pulls out a long, flat box. And he slides the lid off. Archer and Luna look inside, and they can see a long-handled hammer. It is kind of unusually long, and it's got quite a small head, but it looks delicately balanced, almost ornamental. And that impression is backed up by the fact that it is completely unblemished. And even to the most casual observer, you can see that it is made of black iron. And at this point, I think the Anvil explains in detail, and that detail is too long for me to put it here, so I'll just kind of summarize it. The Anvil is sort of like this Dread Pirate Roberts role. Like, there is no actual Anvil, but the job of the Anvil, quote unquote, is like kind of being this phantom presence on last port, ruling by fear and manipulating things from afar. And in this instance, that means total isolation. He inherited this mantle from whoever the last Anvil was, and that means living up here all by yourself, devoid of human contact, keeping the lie alive to retain that anonymity, to keep that kind of threat out there. And this black iron hammer is what his vow to do that was sworn upon. And his tenure as Anvil is now coming to an end, no matter what goes down. So he is going to ask them to swear an iron vow upon it, a vow that may well be impossible, but they're going to try anyway. So let's have a look at the move. Swear an iron vow. When you swear upon iron to complete a quest, write your vow and give it a rank, then roll plus heart. If you swear this vow to a connection, add +1, or a bond, add +2. So this is simply going to be called Bring Down the Pact. And they live on a heavily fortified, seemingly indestructible city-state mega space fortress. So it should be a walk in the park, right? And this raises a very interesting question about vows and, ranks in this game. Because this is like going to be one of the hardest things we ever do, right? But if I make this vow epic or extreme, it might reflect the difficulty, like the impossible odds of it. But it also says that we are committing to a vow that might take a huge amount of game time to complete. And we're coming to the end of our story now. And we have some long-running vows already going in the background, including our background vow. We've made so little progress on those that I think it would be foolhardy and we'd get lost in the weeds if we made this too difficult. So how do we make this like a formidable or dangerous rank without belittling how hard it is? Well, listeners, I am going to have to work very, very hard to use narrative framing here to make sure that we are reminded constantly how difficult and dangerous this is going to be, because this is a suicide mission on paper, right? But in game, I'm going to give it the rank of formidable, which essentially means we have 8 to 10 milestones to be near to completing this. And this is like side point, but someone asked on Reddit the other day about pacing vows, and I think it's an interesting conversation, and I think that I'll probably make a tips video about it at some point. But for now, I think that the best thing for the story and for us is to frame it as a formidable vow and to try and use the narrative and the way that we kind of frame it dramatically to make it feel harder than the rank would suggest it is. And we are now going to swear this iron vow to the anvil. And Archer reaches his hand out and puts it on the handle. And he's surprised to see Luna move in beside him and do the same, because she isn't Ironsworn. This isn't something she does. She kind of catches him looking at her and says, "What? I like sentiment." And she grins at him, and then he has to kind of shake it off and solemnly swear to bring down the pact. Now, Archer is Ironsworn, so I'll be using his stats here. So let's swear an iron vow to bring down the pact, rolling plus heart. That's a weak hit. On a weak hit, you are determined, but begin your quest with more questions than answers. Take +1 momentum and envision what you do to find a path forward. So we are up to 8 momentum. So that's nice, but more questions than answers. I think I'll represent that by the fact that we have no real idea what to expect, right? Like, we haven't even looked at the ship yet, and I have no idea of the layout of Narthex Prime or where the eclipse is on Narthex Prime. So these are all questions that we need to answer. But as far as the vow goes, we're about as ready as we're going to be. And I think that uncertainty can be felt as Archer and Luna let go of the hammer. Like, neither know how they're going to kind of pull this off, but they both know that if they are going to get through this, it will have to be by relying on each other. They are now back together, and that is where they need to be. And at this point, I think like the anvil seems like quite solemn. And I think possibly it's because, like, the mask is off, right? Like, his secret is out. And maybe by being discovered or revealing his identity, he has failed. He has forsaken his vow, which is obviously a big deal in this world. But then also, maybe it doesn't matter with everything going on. Like, they might not exist tomorrow. They might be blown out of the sky. Like, maybe it doesn't matter at all. But anyway, his time as the anvil is over. And depending on how Archer and Luna get on, it could be the end for Last Port 2. Archer kind of noticed this solemnity and kind of tries to change the subject and says, "Okay, let's see this ship." So we cut down to the hangar, and it's sometime later. The enforcer bots are still standing guard. They're keeping a perimeter around the emissary ship, this incongruous ship. The hangar floor is littered with bodies from both sides of the conflict, and those that are still alive are very much keeping their distance from this protective cordon that the bots have formed around the ship. Archer and Luna are slowly stepping over the acolytes and the mercenaries and the denizens of the lower decks as they make their way towards the ship under the watchful eye of the bots, who stand ominously quiet. And Luna says, "You sure he cleared us with these things?" And Archer, kind of trying not to make a noise, kind of says, "He certainly said he did." And Luna says, "He better had. I'm still sore from our last dance." And they get real close, like a few meters away, and they kind of both put their hands out, kind of like palms open, as if to say, "Look, we're unarmed." But the bots, they don't flinch, they don't move. They might, like, to all intents and purposes, look, they're not even activated. They don't do anything. And a few very tense steps later, Archer and Luna pass the bots, creeping slowly past their hulking frames as they continue to look out into the hangar. They're past them now. They're inside the protective ring, and the tension dissipates somewhat so that they breathe a relieved breath. But that is suddenly shattered when they hear the whirring and mechanical crunching of one of the bots, and they turn to see one lurching forward, lurching away from them. And one of the spacers in the hangar saw Archer and Luna walking up to the ship unchallenged and thought that they would take a chance and make a move for something on the floor, like one of the guns of the mercenaries that's kind of in amongst the pile of bodies. But they don't even get close to getting it off the ground before the nearest bot has lumbered towards them and used one of its mighty club-like fists just to smash this spacer into the air, just swipe them off the ground and send them flying into the wall about 15 meters away. Because this thing is like so strong, the spacer just kind of hits the concrete and crumples into a heap on the floor. And I think there's some other kind of like spacers and hangar crew just kind of hanging around, and they kind of slowly see this and back away. And this scene is still very much hot, and Archer and Luna are now kind of convinced, after this brutal display of force, that they are cleared to kind of work there, and they will be protected, and they can just kind of crack on. So what state is the ship in? Well, we said it was damaged, right? And I'm not going to count cosmetic damage. It is bad enough that we are going to have to make some repairs. We're going to have to make the repair move or whatever. So I'm going to say that not only did it take kind of a few dints from small arms fire, a little bit of kind of surface damage before like the bots turned up and kind of put everyone down, before they kind of stepped in. I think that there was actually an attempt, because we saw the Pact getting overwhelmed by the people in the hangar bay. I think that they kind of did get through, and I think there was like an attempt to strip the ship for parts. So there is like obvious damage from gunfire, but there is also significant damage to the exterior, like caused by people tearing the paneling away and ripping out whatever they can get their hands on inside the ship. But yeah, because I think a few brave people kind of got far enough on board and were starting to kind of ransack it before the bots turned up and kind of put them down violently. And Archer and Luna are examining this whole thing, all the damage, and it's kind of overwhelming, because not only is this going to be a lot of work to fix, but so much of the technology is strange or kind of deliberately antiquated, I guess. And Luna is just walking around the inside of the ship, and she can see the things that should be on a ship. She can see the E-drive, the navigational desk, the scanners. It's all there, but it's just different. It's all analog, and there are dials and handles and kind of big cranks where there should be screens and keyboards and consoles and readouts. Like, this is going to take a bit of time to figure out. And Archer kind of looks at her and says, "You think you got this?" Luna nods and says, "Try and find Cole. Could use the help." Archer takes out his comms unit and says, "I'm going to see what I can learn from what's left of the landing party, see if there's anything we can use." And Luna has already rolled her sleeves up and has found herself some tools to work with, and she kind of gets going. Archer hails Cole and fills him in, and then takes out another comms unit. This one is like a little clicker that taps out a message to the anvil, because he needs to secure Cole's passage past the enforcer bots. That's very important. I need to get that plot hole filled in right now before people say, well, why wasn't Cole murdered? So yeah, we've got 2 things to do here. Luna and Cole are going to fix the ship, and Archer is going to see what he can find from what the Pact have left on the ship, and also I'm not going to say loot some corpses, but he's going to look amongst the bodies on the floor to see if he can find anything of use or ascertain a bit more information about where they're going and what they're doing. So I think I'm going to end up playing both Archer and Luna, aren't I, for the rest of this season. And I didn't want to when I set out to make this show. I know that a lot of people play solo games playing multiple characters, but I didn't want to. And, you know, if you're here, you'll remember that this show did not start with Luna at all. It was just Archer on his way, and then 7 episodes in, he got Luna, and she has gone from side character to connection to sidekick to full-on playable character. So I've kind of made a rod for my own back here, but I will try and make it as seamless as possible and try not to cut between the 2 of them quite so quickly and try and focus on one person doing one thing as much as I can. But I appreciate in situations like this, it might be weird not to make moves separately like is happening here, because they are doing separate things. And I know that some of you have wanted this all along. Like, you'll be happy. But for me, it's not an ideal situation, but there you go. I've managed to get through 50 plus episodes without doing this, but I'm happy to indulge you all for the last few. So, who is going to do their move first? I think Archer. I think he's going to spend some time picking over the pieces of the conflict that raged down here, and I think he needs to try and find the emissary's body, see if they had anything of use about their person. But I also think that he'll be kind of doing this on board as well to see if he can find any clues about how the Pact operate, any like clearance codes, or I don't know, whatever. See if someone left a key to Narthex Prime in the glove compartment. I don't know. No, actually, scrub this. Let's do Luna's move first. Yeah, let's do that, because I think that will take longer, and I think that can just kind of be playing out in the background. So we'll kind of whiz time forward a little bit here and have a montage of Luna and Cole, who has kind of now joined them, and they're both working away on the ship. And we see them struggling to understand a lot of it. This thing is going to take a lot of work. It's not totally alien technology, but it's certainly old, and it's certainly way out of both of their collective comfort zones. So Luna is going to make the repairs, but she's also going to leverage her gearhead asset, which has an ability that reads: when you make a move to craft, repair, repurpose, or modify equipment or technology, add +1 and take +1 momentum on a hit. And we are definitely repairing technology here. So we are going to make the repair move. So looking at that move, it says when you make repairs to your vehicles, modules, mechanical companions, or other devices, envision the situation and roll. There's more parts to this move. We're making our own repairs, so we'll be rolling plus wits. And then there's also like a little kind of sub-table about where you do these repairs, whether you're doing it under fire, in the field, or at a facility. And we are at a facility, and it's well stocked. We actually probably couldn't be in a better place to do this, except on like Narthex Prime, where all this technology is kind of maintained. But yeah, in terms of ideal circumstances, we are in that. But it will be difficult due to the nature of the ship. So, Luna, it's on you. Let's roll. Let's repair the emissary's craft. Rolling plus wits. Ouch. That is a hard miss. And no momentum is going to bail us out of that one. So we're going to have to eat that, I'm afraid. On a miss, it says the repairs are not made and the situation worsens. Pay the price. Now, I think, if I remember correctly, there is something on the pay the price table about malfunctioning equipment. Let's have a look. Yes, 57 to 62. Your equipment or vehicle malfunctions. So what I'm actually going to do here, and it's something I've talked about quite a lot, and something that, you know, is a feature of my games, and I think you should make it featured of your games, because, you know, it's a good thing to do. I'm going to bank that miss and that pay the price. And And I'm going to say that for all intents and purposes, Luna and Cole think they have patched up the ship. They think they've done the best possible work they can, but actually they have overlooked something crucial, or something in the inner workings of this thing just couldn't be fixed no matter what. Either way, they've missed something, and I'm going to bank the complication and have that fire later, maybe at the worst possible time, because that is more interesting. It's more interesting than me saying, oh, okay, we failed the roll, the ship doesn't work, I guess we're going to walk or find a different ship, because that's not interesting, is it? That's just not narratively compelling. So we're going to keep that in the back pocket, and hopefully I won't forget about it. But yeah, the ship will work, but at some point it won't. That is what is happening. So whilst all that's gone on, has Archer had better luck? Well, let's find out, because he's scouring the scene, he's checking over the bodies, he's kind of rooting around trying to find something, anything that might assist him. Now, it's a long shot, but it's all he can really do, and I think that Archer's scavenger asset comes into play here too, with the ability that reads: when you gather information or resupply by scavenging a wreck, ruin, or abandoned site, add +1 and take +1 momentum on a hit. And there's an extra bit where finding something of unique value. We will cross that bridge if and when we come to it. I'm saying this is a wreck, right? I'm saying that this very much is a wreck. I'm bending the rules slightly, but it's my game. I don't care. I'm saying it, so that's it. So we're going to make the move, gather information. It says when you search for clues, conduct an investigation, analyze evidence, or do research, roll plus wits. So, Archer, what can you find? Let's try and dig out something that will help us. Rolling plus wits. That is barely a weak hit, but a weak hit nonetheless. On a weak hit, the information provides new insight, but also complicates your quest. Envision what you discover, then take +1 momentum. So +1 momentum, and then the bonus momentum from the asset puts us up to maximum. So that is going to come in handy at some point, which is good given we're doing something incredibly dangerous in a minute. So what do we discover, and how does it complicate our quest? I think to work backwards to that answer is ask the question, like, what were we looking for? What would have been useful? What could Archer reasonably expect to find? I know I joked about finding a key in the glove box, but what is something that would actually realistically be like useful or feasible? Like a map, or a schematic, maybe like a rough layout of Narthex Prime, perhaps. I think that is like feasibly something that would be on that ship. Like maybe he's managed to get a terminal working on board, and whilst it takes him a while to figure out how exactly it works, he manages to bring up this like overview map of Narthex Prime that doesn't like give him a room by room breakdown of what is where, but it gives him general ideas of how big this place is and what kind of place it is. And also I think it gives him a few bits of information that are useful that would just be good to know before you get there, such as there is maybe a transit system that moves people around. Like, he doesn't know how to use it or where any of it goes, but he knows there is one. And I think that the complication, the thing that complicates our quest, is that Archer really finally is starting to get a grasp on how big this thing is, how vast it is, and how big in turn the scale of the challenge ahead of them is. And the Eclipse is going to be in some sort of holding bay or hangar bay. And from the looks of it, like, there are hundreds of hangar bays spread all over the layout. And what he thought was going to be hard just got a lot harder. But they have this ship, and they are obviously that's the other thing he discovers. I think he realizes they're going to have to take some of these outfits, right? You're going to take some of these robes that the Pact wore when they arrived. They're totally going to robe up and like kind of dress as the acolytes and blend in, because it would be foolish not to. Plus, also Luna would hate it. So I think that's, his first and foremost job is to kind of get a lot of those together. So we've got some Pact uniforms and like some weapons as well gathered together, the ones that aren't covered in too much blood. And we're ready to go. The ship is done. And I think as Archer and Luna and Cole are coming to the conclusion that, you know, they're as ready as they're going to be, they see some people approaching the ship. And Luna recognizes them right away as a detachment of mercenaries, maybe kind of 10, 15, maybe 20 of them. And they're pretty much exactly the ones who were guarding the Eclipse. They are heavily armed. They're in tactical gear. They're holding assault weapons. They've got explosives. They are armed to the teeth, professional soldiers. And to Archer's immense discomfort, the Enforcer bots let them through the cordon. And he is kind of already reaching out to stop Luna raising her rifle. And he does so because he has seen someone standing further back from the cordon. It is the Anvil. They are dressed now in unremarkable, dirty spacer gear. They have a heavy shawl wrapped around their shoulders. And he gives Archer this solemn nod as if to say, these are to go with you to help you, basically. And Archer returns the nod. And he watches the mercenaries start to kind of scavenge among the areas for more packed robes and weapons. And when Archer looks up again, the Anvil is gone. As the mercenaries get aboard, they make their last checks. And I think just quickly, if you'll indulge me, I want to have a quick scene here that Archer just kind of observes. And that is of Cole saying goodbye to his crew. I don't think there's any way that Cole would let them come with him, even though they would have wanted to. So Archer kind of stood at the bottom of the landing ramp, watching them some way off, kind of gather in the hangar and share this mournful, emotional farewell, because this is probably going to be it for them. And not even in just like a fatalistic way, even if everything goes to plan, if everything goes without a hitch, no one knows what will happen to the people when they're finally allowed to leave the sector. Like, no one wants to stay on Last Port. This isn't home for anyone. So Cole's crew will probably hitch a ride on the last ride out of here, because this place is going to be deserted. And then if it goes badly, they're going to meet the same fate as every other poor soul on this ship. And Cole, given the danger that he's kind of going into now with Archer and Luna, can't reasonably promise to come back for them. They survived together on that verdant world, and they eked out an existence in the mountains. And then they escaped when Archer arrived. And then eventually Cole and the others came back for those who couldn't make it. But now this really is goodbye. It's the final parting of the peacekeepers who have been through so much and now must go their separate ways and try and survive in a forge that has forgotten them. So Archer watches this moment for a while before leaving them to their privacy and takes his place in the strange antique cockpit. Cole arrives a few moments later, takes the seat at the controls, and I think I've got this idea that he's kind of got his own setup that sort of plugs into the console, his own set of controls that's going to make this thing kind of easier to pilot. And he checks everyone's ready and fires up the engines, which make an almighty racket, and he kind of shoots Luna a quick kind of nervous look as if he's worried that this might not hold together after the repairs they've done. And this thing begins to rise, and as it does, the shuddering and shaking intensifies, and after a few seconds, it kind of settles into this steady, weird hum, like doesn't make the noise that most normal engines make. And it's much to Luna and Cole's relief, I might add. Cole pushes a few switches on his interface and glides the oddly shaped craft out of the hangar, away from Last Port and into space. And he says, "Everyone ready?" Archer and Luna nod. An unspoken recognition that they are all doing this. Archer looks down at a small device the Anvil gave him. It's a scanner that is locked onto the tracer aboard the Eclipse. It beeps steadily. And Archer says, "Let's do it. Cole makes a few last-minute adjustments and fires up the E-drive. It feels unfamiliar to them all to have an E-drive that works properly. It sounds healthy, it purrs as it readies, and when Cole plunges the handle down to jump, the dark void of space in front of them burns an intense pink, and the ship lurches into the drift with real bite. Now, I'm not going to roll anything here, and I mean, I don't want to, first of all, because I could have made the move set a course. But please remember, we have a bad miss already rolled over from Luna's repairs. If we make another move here when we don't really need to and it goes wrong, we're potentially layering on complications that we don't need. And I mean, no one needs complications, but like, we've already got one, so why bother adding another one? Like, the best thing we can do is, I think the strong hit on set of course is, hey, it favours you when you arrive. It's not going to favour us. We're going to a giant, dangerous place that no one in their right mind would ever do or try and kind of escape from. So I'm just going to skip it and get the story moving, because that's the most important thing at this point. So I think they are in the drift for about an hour. And it's an unfamiliar feeling given how inhibited E-drive travel has been in this sector. I remember they can only jump for about 10-15 minutes at a time. But they don't take any comfort from that, because when they eventually do drop out of the drift, they will face a Herculean task. And that drop is coming. They all gather around Cole's console to watch as the timer ticks down, indicating their imminent arrival in the demisector where they need to be. Everyone is tense, the hypnotic swirls of the drift dancing outside offering no comfort whatsoever, and they count down with the console. Archer feels his stomach sink. Luna can feel a trembling in her hands that she tries to still. Cole is the model of concentration as he keeps his eyes trained on the console. Suddenly, they drop. The lights outside fade and they emerge from the drift and come face to face with Narthex Prime. Archer's mouth falls open and Luna grips onto the headrest of Cole's seat as she tries to steady herself. Before them is an unimaginably vast structure, maybe 100 kilometers square, dark and foreboding. It has a strange mix of the industrial and the ornate. Kilometers of heavy pipework and ducting seem to run across the whole thing, while twisted spires and domed decorative roofs appear with regularity across its entire surface. It does not look like a craft at all, but looks almost as if someone has detached a fortified city from a planet's surface and put it into space. There is activity everywhere, vents shooting jets of yellow steam, tiny interceptors buzzing around the towers. It is an awe-inspiring sight, and Archer, Luna, and Cole are reacting entirely appropriately. Archer takes a moment to compose himself, because he needs it, frankly, and checks the tracking device. It's still active, and the signal that's coming from the eclipse appears to be on the side of Narthex Prime that is nearest to them, which would be a positive if that area wasn't so vast and so large. And he scans the surface for some kind of hangar bay, a dock or anything, but there are just so many things that could potentially be hangar bays that it's impossible to tell. And that's when a light appears on the readout, this old analog readout with a series of tiny little lights that dimly glow. And it's a proximity alarm. And Cole says, we've got a chaperone. And 2 interceptors are now flying alongside the ship. They are chrome-finished, kind of snub-nosed, short-range fighters ready to escort them in. At least, I guess, that, they'll now know where they have to go. They've got someone to follow. And Cole receives some sort of message on his console, and that's mirrored on the ship's console, where reams of tape are kind of coiling out of a machine. And the escorts move out in front of the ship, moving into a position where they can just lead them in. And Archer gives the nod for Cole to follow, and they begin moving towards what now appears to be several dozen hangar bays along the side nearest to us. And Archer He's just kind of looking at some of the armaments that adorn this place. Like almost every inch of Narthex Prime is covered in a weapon of some kind. There are huge cannon batteries. There's short-range turrets and missile arrays everywhere. And even the middling kind of size ones are bigger than anything Archer has ever seen on even like a clan warship. This is truly a fortress. Even if they get on board, how they are going to escape is beyond him. But still, he finds somewhere in him the resolve to turn to the others and say, get in, get out, stay. And before he can finish that thought, he is thrown to the floor as smoke and flames rush through the cabin. Alarms are blaring, klaxons are shaking his skull. And he's kind of sprawling around on the floor. He can see Luna trying to get to her feet, trying to get to the raging flames that are spilling out of the paneling on the far side of the cockpit. And Cole is trying to help her, kind of flicking every switch he can, trying to find the fire suppressant systems. Luna's screaming something at Archer, but he can't hear her over the alarms. Eventually, Cole hits the right switch, and the cabin is filled with white jets of fire suppression mist, quickly bringing the fire under control, allowing the smoke to clear, and for the three of them to see the ragged hole in the side of the cockpit. Whatever was there is now just a tangle of twisted metal and wires. And gathering herself, Luna says, "The fire is out. That's something." And that's when they feel the ship start to tip to one side. And they can see the interceptors streaking off ahead as the emissary's ship starts to dive. The lights across the entire console, both the ship's and Cole's, start to go out one by one. And Cole says, "Losing power here. Losing all systems." And they all start to feel themselves lifted from the floor as they begin to float as the artificial gravity cuts out. And now they have drifted a significant distance away from where they were headed, away from the hangar bay where they were being led, and even further away from the eclipse. And most alarming of all, now they seem to be drifting away from Narthex Prime altogether. Archer attempts to pull himself through the cabin, try and get a better look at where they are actually headed, whilst Cole and Luna frantically trying to stabilize the ship. Luna is up to her elbows in wires at some panel or another, while Cole is kind of playing whack-a-mole with all the buttons on this huge ancient console. Then the gravity starts to kick back in and Archer crashes to the floor. Luna says, "Grav's back up." But then the lights go out, replaced by orange emergency lighting and an ominous low beep. And Luna says, "Okay, now the O2 is out." So this is what a miss on a repair move will get you, if you're wondering. And also wondering is Archer, who wonders if things can get much worse as they drift past the exact place they are trying to get. You can see the interceptors swinging round now and like more being scrambled. And that's when everything suddenly stabilizes and they stop drifting. He looks at Cole. Cole says, "Wasn't me." Looks at Luna. Luna says, "Not me. I was just making things worse." Cole notices a blue light flicker on the console and says, "Tractor beam." And he gestures out of the viewpoint and they can see the telltale blue light of a tractor beam emanating from one of the hangar bays way down towards the bottom of the structure. But at least they are being pulled aboard, which is something. They are so far away from where they need to be, but they are being pulled aboard. And you know what? Even though arriving here has been a clusterfuck, shall we say, I think it counts for something. And I think that we need all the help we can get in this instance. We are going to be safely aboard any second. And I think that counts as overcoming a critical obstacle in terms of our vow. So let's mark progress. So bring down the pact 1 out of 10. We are crushing this, guys. This will be a breeze. So we're pulled aboard and we're arriving into this docking bay. And it is not a docking bay, shall we say, befitting of the emissary ship. And if Archer were a gambling man, he'd be putting quite a lot of money on the Pact hastily diverting what was probably like a welcome party down to this new, less than salubrious docking bay. And I think that he realizes that might have bought them a little bit of time. Cole manages to get the landing gear down as systems start to come back online one by one, as him and Luna they start to patch things up and divert power or whatnot. And all the while, Archer is looking at the situation through the viewport. The hangar they're being pulled into is cavernous. It's huge, but it's empty by the looks of things. In terms of like other ships, definitely. There is like big bits of machinery around with like huge pistons and chimneys, almost like they're steam powered or something. It's very much got that vibe. And he does see a few acolytes in their robes kind of darting in and around between the consoles and the machinery as they desperately try and power up the hangar. Archer gets into his acolyte's robes and gestures for the others to do the same. The ship finally touches down, and as Luna is getting into her robe, she joins Archer at the viewport and says, "Okay, what now?" And Archer says, "If we move fast, we might be able to push it into the interior before they realise we're here." And that last word hangs in the air. And as it does, a set of double doors open into the hangar, and maybe 24 acolytes file slowly in, and they are followed by 4 towering bronze-armoured vanguard. And it feels very much like a ceremonial procession, like they are, as Archer guessed, a welcome party. The ship getting into difficulty, I think, and ending up in this bay is unusual to the Pact, but it's certainly not outrageous. This is probably standard procedure for welcoming the emissary ship back. But to those on board who know the truth, what's greeting them is a problem. This is bad. This is a problem. And Luna notices this and says, "Okay, so what now?" And Archer is trying to figure that out, right? Just as he's kind of adjusting his robes. And as he does, the professor's black iron compass that he wears around his neck kind of falls out of his undershirt. And he reaches to tuck it back in. But the second his fingers make contact with the metal, he feels everything around him quieten. There is no sound, no vibrations, nothing. And then he hears a voice. Or to be more precise, he hears voices. You've come a long way, traveller. You've come a long way, traveller. You've come a long way, traveller. And he can see Luna in front of him mouthing something. It's not until she physically shakes him and says, "What is it, Archer? What is it?" And Archer is shaken, but also sort of hyper-aware. And he hands her the tracker and says, "Get the Eclipse. Get Griff." And Luna says, "What?" And Archer says, "I have to do something." Luna says, "Archer, no." He ducks down and spins the wheel in a hatch on the floor and looks at her and says, "You can do it. I'll find you. Trust me." And he pulls his hood up. He smiles softly at her and climbs out of the ship. Luna is stunned. She looks down at the tracker, then out of the viewport at the massed ranks of acolytes and vanguards. She runs out of the cockpit and down a corridor and heads down to the hold, where she finds Cole and the mercenaries gathered, ready, hooded, weapons stowed beneath their robes. They look to her for guidance, for orders, for a plan. She takes a deep breath and says, "Okay, everyone. Time to cause a fucking scene." Thank you a million times. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe if you have not done so already, and click the little bell icon so you can be notified as soon as the next episode drops. And please do check out the Bad Spot Patreon. I'll be back next time, but until then, it's farewell and safe passage.